A freak encounter with a New York City taxi sent me flying. Next thing I knew, I was in some celestial waiting room, watching an overworked angel swipe through my life on a tablet. He pinched the bridge of his nose, the way you do when you've got a killer migraine. "Look," he said, sighing, "your whole existence. It's just bleak. A real downer. You're dragging down the whole vibe up here. Do us all a favor and just go back. Try again." So after a nauseating cosmic spin cycle, I did. I got to keep my life, but it seemed my brain had been wiped clean in the process. My eyes fluttered open to the sterile smell of antiseptic, a scent so sharp it felt like it was physically scouring my brain. A woman was sitting by the bed. A woman so beautiful she didn't look quite real. She wore a black power suit, tailored so perfectly it seemed fused to her terrifyingly perfect curves. Her long legs were sheathed in stockings, so sheer they were a whisper of color on her skin, ending in a pair of stiletto heels that radiated a do-not-approach energy field. She sat there silently, flipping through a file, her coolly elegant face a perfect, unreadable mask, as if the entire world were a minor distraction. I touched my chin, a dull ache throbbing at the base of my skull. "So, you my girlfriend?" I ventured. My voice was as dry and scratchy as sandpaper. She looked up from the file. Her eyes, almond-shaped and intelligent, met mine without a flicker of emotion. She gave a simple, single nod. I let my gaze travel from the top of her head to the tips of those lethal heels and back again. My Adam's apple did a nervous little dance in my throat. Then I shook my head, my conviction absolute. "I don't believe you." Her eyebrow twitched, a barely perceptible motion. I took a deep breath, summoned all my courage, and flashed what I hoped was a charming, roguish smile. "Unless you give me a kiss." The moment the words left my mouth, the temperature in the room plummeted. She stared at me, her expression unchanged. It wasn't the look you give a patient with amnesia. It was the look you give a strange insect you're about to humanely euthanize with the bottom of your shoe. My stomach dropped. Okay, bad joke. Definitely read the room wrong. This woman did not look like she had a sense of humor. Just as I was about to stammer out an apology, she snapped the file shut and stood up. "The paperwork is done. You've been discharged," she said. Her voice was like her, ice cold, with no room for negotiation. With that, she turned and walked away. The sharp click, click, click of her heels on the polished linoleum floor was the only sound, each step a tiny hammer blow against my heart. I was stunned. That's it? She wasn't going to slap me? Or call me a pig? I scrambled out of the hospital bed, noticing I was in one of those humiliating blue and white striped gowns. The back of my hand was still taped up from it before. Other than a little weakness, I felt surprisingly okay. I practically fell out of the room after her. "Hey, wait up. I'm sorry, I have a big mouth," I yelled, half running to catch up. "It was a joke. Don't take it seriously." She didn't break her stride, heading straight for the elevators. I put on a burst of speed, squeezing through the doors just as they were sliding shut. The elevator was small. The air was filled with her perfume, a subtle, clean scent I couldn't name, but found incredibly distracting. I scratched the back of my head, suddenly finding the floor fascinating. "So, where are we going?" "Home," she said. "Home." I tried to run a search of the word home in the empty hard drive of my brain and came back with a big fat 404 error. Where did I live before? A cramped apartment in Queens? Some corporate dorm in Jersey? The elevator dinged, opening onto the ground floor. She strode out, and I followed, trailing behind her like a guilty puppy. At the curb, a black sedan, the make of which I didn't recognize, but which screamed expensive, glided silently to a stop in front of us. A driver in a black suit and white gloves got out and respectfully opened the rear passenger door. "Ms. Vance." "Vance?" Her name was Vance. She ignored the driver, glancing back at me with a look that clearly meant, "Get in." I swallowed hard and, under the driver's slightly bewildered gaze, dove into the back of the car. The interior was spacious, with leather seats so soft I felt like I was sinking into a cloud. I shifted uncomfortably, terrified I was going to get a smudge on something. She slid in beside me. The car pulled smoothly into traffic. I snuck a sideways glance at her. "Ms. Vance?" Sounded like a CEO. Was she really my girlfriend? What did I do for a living that I could land a woman like this? Was I a sugar baby The moment the thought popped into my head, it felt alarmingly plausible. Yeah, that had to be it. I must be ridiculously handsome. I'd used my good looks to snag a rich girlfriend. Then I must have done something to piss her off, so she hired someone to hit me with a car. But she got scared I'd actually die, so she brought me to the hospital. And now that I have amnesia, she can mold me into whatever she wants. A chill ran down my spine. I looked at her again, this time with a healthy dose of fear. She must have felt my stare because she turned her head. "What is it?" she asked, her voice flat. Nothing," I stammered, shaking my head quickly. "Just, you're really beautiful. Hey, flattery will get you everywhere, or at least keep you from getting whacked again." She didn't react, just turned her gaze back to the window. "If you've forgotten, maybe it's for the best," she said softly. My panic level shot through the roof. For the best? What the hell had I done? Was I a murderer? Did I owe some astronomical debt to the mob? The car sped along, eventually turning into a neighborhood I'd only ever seen in movies. A private, gated community with sprawling mansions, manicured lawns, and a silence that felt a world away from the city. Finally, we pulled up to a massive, ultra-modern villa that looked like it belonged on the cover of an architecture magazine. The driver got out to open our doors. I stood on the driveway, staring up at the 3-story behemoth with its own private courtyard, my mouth hanging open wide enough to catch flies. This is your place?" I asked. She looked at me, and for the first time, a flicker of some complex emotion crossed her face. It looked like a mixture of pity and exasperation. "No," she said, shaking her head. "It's yours. Mine." I think my brain just blue screened. Feeling like a hick on his first trip to the big city, I followed Catherine Vance into what was supposedly my home. The foyer was big enough to host a small wedding. A crystal chandelier the size of a smart car glittered above us, dazzling my eyes. A housekeeper in a professional uniform hurried over to respectfully take Catherine's coat. "Welcome home, sir," she said, giving me a slight bow before offering me a pair of slippers. I looked down. They were leather. They looked more expensive than any pair of shoes I could remember ever owning. I slipped them on, my feet practically buzzing with the unfamiliar luxury. "He has amnesia. He doesn't remember anything," Catherine said to the housekeeper. "Maria, could you make him something to eat?" "Something light." "Of course, Ms. Vance." Maria nodded, her eyes full of sympathy as she looked at me. Catherine left me, standing there, and headed up the grand staircase. I was alone in the cavernous living room, completely unsure of what to do with my hands. The room was absurdly large, with floor-to-ceiling windows that looked out onto a perfect green lawn and a sparkling swimming pool. A giant L-shaped sofa could have comfortably seated a dozen people. A piece of abstract art hung on the wall that was, if possible, even more confusing than my current situation. I perched gingerly on the very edge of the sofa, terrified that my weight might somehow damage the ridiculously expensive-looking fabric. Soon, Maria returned with a bowl of steaming soup and a few small, elegant side dishes. "Enjoy, sir." "Thank you, Maria," I said, feeling like an imposter. I was starving. I picked up the bowl and started eating. The soup was simple and delicious, a warm, comforting broth. I was hunched over the bowl, completely focused on my food, when a man in his 40s, wearing a sharp suit and a deeply serious expression, rushed in from outside. His eyes landed on me, and he strode over quickly, his face a jumble of relief, worry, and something that looked like awe. "Mr. Sterling," he exclaimed, his voice trembling slightly. "You're finally awake." "Mr. Sterling." I froze, a spoonful of soup halfway to my mouth. "Wasn't my name Alex?" I felt like my driver's license said Alex Hayes. What was this? Was Mr. Sterling some kind of stage name? I stared at him, completely blank. The man obviously misinterpreted my silence. He thought I was angry with him. His face went pale, and beads of sweat popped up on his forehead. "Mr. Sterling, I'm so sorry. It was my failure. I wasn't able to protect you. Please forgive me." And then, to my absolute horror, he dropped to his knees right there on the polished marble floor. Puffed. The soup I'd just eaten sprayed out of my mouth. Cough, cough, cough. I choked, my face turning beet red. "Hey, get up. What are you doing?" I scrambled to try and pull him up. What century was this? Was I some kind of feudal lord? My reaction seemed to stun him, but he didn't get up. He just stayed there, kneeling, looking up at me. "Sir, what are you?" What could I say? You scared the hell out of me. After a long coughing fit, my brain started whirring. He called me Mr. Sterling. Catherine was Ms. Vance. This mansion was mine. Putting it all together, it seemed my previous identity was a bit more complicated than Sugar Baby. Was I a mob boss? The thought sent a jolt through me. It was just like in the movies, right? The boss gets into an accident, and his loyal underling kneels before him, begging for forgiveness. I took a deep breath. I had to play along. What other choice did I have? I cleared my throat, tried to arrange my face into a more serious, thoughtful expression. I leaned back against the sofa, affecting a casual posture that I hoped radiated quiet authority. Get up, I said, my voice low and even. The man looked like he'd just received a presidential pardon. He shakily got to his feet, but kept his back bowed, not daring to meet my eyes. Bob, I said, deciding to give him a name. What's been happening? I had no idea if his name was Bob, but in these situations, isn't it always a Bob, a Bill, or a Mike? I took a shot. The man I just christened Bob stiffened. Then he looked at me with an expression of pure, unadulterated worship. Mr. Sterling, you remember me? My heart skipped a beat. Crap, did I guess wrong? No, wait. Judging by his reaction, maybe I guessed right. I kept my face a perfect mask of calm. I picked up my soup, blew on it gently, and said nonchalantly, I remember the people and things that matter. It was the perfect non-answer, vague enough to mean anything. I was a genius. Bob looked like he was about to cry with joy. Mr. Sterling, I knew it. I knew you'd be all right. He wiped the corner of his eye, then immediately snapped back to his serious demeanor and began his report. Sir, while you were unconscious, that punk Marcus Thorne has been making moves. He's been spreading rumors that you were finished, and he tried to poach our most important partner, Mr. Henderson from Omnicorp. Marcus Thorne? Mr. Henderson? The names meant nothing to me. Seeing my silence, Bob assumed I was deep in strategic thought. That idiot Thorne thinks he can just swoop in now that you're down. Morale at the company is low, and several projects have stalled. Mr. Sterling, what should we do? We await your orders. He looked at me with breathless anticipation, as if waiting for divine revelation. Orders? I didn't even know who he was. The only thing on my mind was that the soup was really good, and I wanted another bowl. So I looked at Bob, summoned every ounce of acting talent I possessed, and with an air of profound wisdom, I slowly uttered 3 words. First, we eat. Bob froze. The expression on his face shifted from anticipation to confusion, then to shock, and finally to the kind of ecstatic joy you see in people who have just found religion. His eyes lit up, and his whole body trembled with excitement. Understand. I get it, he slapped his thigh. Mr. Sterling, you truly are Mr. Sterling. I was being too impulsive. Huh? What did he get? I held my soup bowl, staring at him in utter bewilderment. Bob, in a voice thrumming with excitement, began to analyze my strategy for me. First, we eat. It's brilliant. On the surface, it shows a calm concern for one's own well-being. But the subtext is the wisdom of a general who remains impassive while the world crumbles around him. You're telling us not to panic, that the sky isn't falling, that a 2-bit player like Marcus Thorne isn't even worth breaking our stride for. The most important thing right now is to stabilize, to fortify our own position, to conserve our strength. You're playing the long game. Let him punch himself out, and then, when he's exhausted, we strike with the force of a thunderbolt. Brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. Bob looked at me, his eyes overflowing with a reverence that was frankly starting to freak me out. I was just hungry. Bob left, filled with a renewed sense of purpose and an undying admiration for my strategic genius. He said he was going back to the office to rally the troops and implement my play it cool initiative. I watched his retreating back, then silently finished another bowl of soup Maria brought me. This misunderstanding was getting a little out of hand. With a full stomach, I finally had the energy to explore my house. The place was big enough to host the Olympics. It had a study, a gym, a home theater, and even an indoor heated pool. My bedroom was on the 2nd floor, directly across the hall from Catherine's. I pushed open the door to my room and was met with a blast of cool air. The entire space was decorated in stark shades of black, white, and gray. It was minimalist to the extreme and just as cold. The walk-in closet was filled with identical black suits and white shirts, like the uniform for some secret agent. In the study, I found a framed photograph. It was a picture of two people, me and Catherine. The me in the photo wore a perfectly tailored black suit, his hair slicked back, his eyes sharp and intense. His mouth was set in a firm line, and his whole posture screamed, "I am not to be trifled with." Catherine stood beside him. She had the same cool expression, but there was an unmistakable hint of reliance, of softness, in the way she looked at him. I touched my own face. Was that really me? The guy in the photo looked like he could kill 3 of me with his bare hands. As I was staring at the picture, Catherine appeared silently in the doorway. "You're going back to the office tomorrow," she stated. The office? I stammered. "Do I have to?" My brain still scrambled. "I won't be any use." "Yes," she said, her tone final. "You have to be seen. If you don't show up soon, the company will fall apart." "But you don't have to do anything," she cut me off. Just sit there. You know, that didn't sound so bad. The next day, I was squeezed into an obscenely expensive black suit. Maria slicked my hair back with what felt like an entire tub of gel. I looked in the mirror at the sharp, ridiculously handsome stranger staring back at me and felt a profound sense of dislocation. Catherine drove, this time in a cherry red Ferrari. My palms were sweating the whole way downtown. "So, Catherine," I began cautiously, "what exactly does our company do?" She kept her eyes on the road. "Investments." "Oh, right. Investment firm." I nodded, slightly relieved. It sounded a lot more legitimate than being a mob boss. "And what's my job title?" She finally glanced at me, a strange look in her eyes. "You're the boss." "Right, the boss." "Sure." The Ferrari pulled into a private garage beneath a glittering skyscraper in the heart of the financial district. We took a private elevator straight to the top floor. When the doors opened, a line of impeccably dressed men and women were waiting. They all bowed in unison. "Good morning, Mr. Sterling." "Good morning, Ms. Vance." The sound was so loud and synchronized it nearly made my knees buckle. Catherine strode past them without a word. I followed stiffly, feeling like a puppet on a string. She led me to a corner office that was bigger than my last apartment and pointed to a desk that could have doubled as a king-size bed. "This is your office." Then she pointed to an adjoining door. "That's mine." Before I could even process this, there was a knock. Bob entered, followed by several other people who looked dangerously intelligent. "Mr. Sterling, Ms. Vance, the boardroom is ready. We need your direction on how to handle Thorne's hostile takeover attempt," Bob said gravely. My scalp prickled. Here we go again. I was swept into a long, intimidating boardroom and placed at the head of the table. Catherine sat at my right hand. The room was filled with serious-looking executives in dark suits. A man with glasses started a PowerPoint presentation, showing slides filled with charts and graphs I didn't understand. He spoke a language of K-lines, P/E ratios, and leverage buyouts that made my head spin. I just wanted to take a nap. They debated heatedly, occasionally glancing at me, their eyes full of hope and expectation. I sat there sweating, feeling like a fraud. What was I supposed to do? I didn't understand a single word they were saying. Just as I was about to give in to despair, I saw it. My salvation. In the center of the long table sat an elaborate fruit platter. There was melon, grapes, dragon fruit. And right in the middle, nestled like a spiky, pungent king, was a piece of cut durian. My eyes lit up. I love durian. A tense silence fell over the room. Everyone was looking at me, waiting for my final verdict. Slowly, I reached out my hand. Under the astonished gazes of the entire executive team, I pointed a trembling finger at the golden, creamy flesh of the durian. Then, in what I hoped was a voice full of wisdom and experience, I said slowly, "This thing smells terrible, but it tastes amazing." I felt that wasn't quite enough, so I added on a whim. "Some people seem impressive on the outside, but on the inside, they're just full of rotten garbage. All you have to do is find the soft spot and poke it, and the whole thing collapses." The boardroom was utterly silent. Every single person was staring at me, mouths agape, as if I'd just started speaking in tongues. Crap, I'd overdone it. They're discussing a multi-billion-dollar deal, and I'm philosophizing about fruit. They were going to fire me. On the spot, I squeezed my eyes shut, bracing for the inevitable humiliation. But the laughter and ridicule never came. 1 second passed. 2. Suddenly, the silence was shattered by a sound like a thunderclap. It was applause. I opened my eyes. Bob was on his feet, his face flushed with excitement, clapping his hands raw. Brilliant. Absolutely brilliant, Mr. Sterling. A masterstroke of insight. One by one, the other executives shot to their feet, joining the thunderous applause. Their faces were lit up with a kind of manic glee. I get it. Marcus Thorne's offensive looks intimidating. It stinks, but his company is fundamentally strong. If we can just weather this initial assault, we can acquire his assets for pennies on the dollar. It'll taste amazing. Full of rotten garbage. That's it. His cash flow. He must be over-leveraged. Mr. Sterling is on another level. We were thinking about defense, and he was already planning how we'd feast on the spoils of victory. I looked at the team of energized executives, then at the durian on the table. This world was getting weirder by the minute. I really wanted a piece of durian. Catherine, who was sitting beside me, hadn't applauded. She was just watching me, her expression a cocktail of surprise, curiosity, and a confusion I couldn't quite decipher. It was as if she was trying to figure out if I was a complete idiot or playing a game of 4D chess she couldn't even comprehend. The durian strategy, as it came to be known, was implemented with a speed and ferocity that baffled me. Bob assembled a task force, codenamed Project Poke, composed of the firm's top analysts. They worked in shifts around the clock, poring over every financial document associated with Marcus Thorne's companies, determined to find that one soft spot. As for me, the architect of this grand strategy, I was respectfully escorted back to my office. They even brought the entire fruit platter with me. I contentedly ate my durian, thinking that being the boss wasn't so bad after all. You say some random nonsense, and a team of brilliant people makes it happen. And you get free fruit. Catherine didn't go to her own office. She sat on the sofa opposite my desk, working on her laptop. Every now and then, she'd look up at me. The ice was still there, but I thought I saw something new in her eyes. Don't you have work to do? I asked, my mouth full of durian. I'm waiting for you to finish for the day, she said simply. Waiting for me? How thoughtful. Maybe this whole girlfriend thing wasn't a total fabrication. The next couple of days were the best of my life. I was living the dream. Catherine would drop me off at the office, and I'd spend the day drinking tea, reading the news, and playing video games on the high-end computer on my desk. Bob would come in once a day to give me an update on Project Poke, his voice filled with reverence as he'd report on another suspicious liability they'd uncovered in one of Thorne's subsidiaries. I would just nod sagely and say things like, "Keep up the good work," or "Don't overwork yourselves." And Bob would leave, practically glowing with motivation. I was learning the secret to being a great leader. Say as little as possible. The less you say, the more they fill in the blanks. On the afternoon of the third day, I was trying to beat a particularly tough level on a mobile game when my office door burst open. Bob flew in like a hurricane, his face radiating a joy that bordered on insanity. "Mr. Sterling, we did it! We did it!" he yelled, so excited he was practically vibrating. He startled me so badly that my thumb slipped and my character in the game was instantly vaporized. "Easy, Bob," I said, putting my phone down and trying to project an aura of calm authority. "What happened?" We poked it," Bob gasped, slapping a file down on my desk. "We followed your instructions. We focused on Thorne's most profitable-looking subsidiaries, the ones with the heaviest cash flow, and we found it. His flagship company, Thorne Capital, has been engaged in illegal leveraging and money laundering. We sent a tiny anonymous tip to the SEC, and they pulled the thread. The whole thing unraveled. The feds just froze all his accounts. The hostile takeover is dead. The partners he was trying to poach are running for the hills. He's finished. We won." By the end of his speech, Bob's voice was hoarse with emotion. I just stared at him dumbfounded. "That's it? We won. All because I want a piece of fruit?" My luck was getting ridiculous. The news spread through the office like wildfire. Muffled cheers and shouts of victory echoed from the main floor. Everyone knew that we had just won a corporate war in the most bizarre way imaginable. Can you believe it? Mr. Sterling took down Thorne with a piece of durian. That wasn't a piece of fruit, you idiot. That was a Taoist parable. It was Sun Tzu, the mind of Mr. Sterling is not for us mere mortals to comprehend. I listened to the chatter from my office, feeling my face grow hot. Catherine came in. She looked at me, and for the first time, all the suspicion and confusion were gone from her eyes. In their place was a look of pure, unadulterated admiration. "I never should have doubted you," she said, her voice soft and just a little shaky. I opened my mouth to say something, to tell her it was all just a crazy coincidence, that I was a fraud. But looking into her bright, shining eyes, seeing the worshipful face of Bob and hearing the cheers of the employees outside, the words died in my throat. What could I say? If I told the truth, this amazing new life, the one where I got to eat durian and play video games all day, would vanish. So I did the only thing I could do. I leaned into the lie. I picked up my teacup, took a delicate sip, and gazed out the window at the city skyline. It was to be expected, I said, my voice the very picture of nonchalant victory. A man like Thorne was never a threat. Behind me, Bob looked like he was about to faint from sheer awe. What I didn't know was that at that very moment, across town, Marcus Thorne was screaming and smashing everything in his office. Durian. Durian. What the hell does durian have to do with anything? It was a multi-billion-dollar question he would spend the rest of his life trying to answer. My new title, The Durian God, became the stuff of legend in the financial world overnight. The story was everywhere. The mysterious Mr. Sterling, a man who moved like a ghost, had crushed the ambitious Thorne Group with a simple metaphor about a piece of fruit. My persona was mythologized. Some said I was a master of ancient divination, that I had read the future in the shape and smell of the fruit. Others said I had psychic abilities and had seen the rot in Thorne's finances all along. One particularly wild rumor claimed I wasn't even human, but the literal god of commerce. The rumors were absurd, but they cemented my position. No one at the company questioned me anymore. They treated me with a reverence usually reserved for living saints. Life settled into a comfortable routine. I'd go to work, enjoy the perks of being a reclusive genius, and occasionally offer pearls of wisdom like, "I see, and you handle it," whenever Bob asked for guidance. Catherine's attitude toward me changed, too. The icy wall between us began to thaw. She was still quiet, but she started asking me what I wanted for dinner. When I got stuck on a video game, I'd find a printed-out walkthrough sitting on my desk the next morning. It felt nice to be cared for. I was actually starting to enjoy this fake life. But the peace didn't last. After a few quiet weeks, trouble came knocking again. And the source, once again, was Marcus Thorne. His company was in shambles, but his family's old money was still intact. He couldn't let the humiliation go. This time, he decided on a more direct approach. "Mr. Sterling," Bob said, his face graver than I'd ever seen it. "Marcus Thorne. He's issued a formal challenge." "A challenge?" I blinked. "What, he wants to fight me?" "No. It's an invitation to the Starlight Gala." Bob explained, "It's the city's most exclusive charity auction. Only the biggest players get an invitation. It's less about charity and more about a place for the rich and powerful to flex on each other. Thorne specifically named you in the press release. He said he looks forward to a friendly competition with you at the auction." I got it. It was a public pissing contest. "I'm not going," I said flatly. Going to a place like that was just asking to be exposed. "Sir, I don't think you have a choice," Bob said, his face pained. "Thorne has made it a public spectacle. The whole city is watching. If you don't show up, they'll say you were afraid of him. It would be a disaster for the company's reputation." Catherine came over, her expression firm. "Mr. Sterling doesn't back down from fight." "Great. Trap again." I looked at the two of them, one pleading, one resolute. I felt like a man being gently encouraged to walk off a cliff. "Fine," he sighed. "I'll go. What was the worst that could happen? I'll just go keep my mouth shut and not bid on anything. Let Thorne waste his money." My plan was simple. Stay quiet and don't make waves. I had severely underestimated Marcus Thorne's stupidity and my own weakness. The Starlight Gala was held in the grand ballroom of a 6-star hotel downtown. I was poured into a ridiculously expensive, custom-tailored tuxedo with a beautiful, elegantly dressed Catherine on my arm. Her silver, backless gown turned every head in the room. I felt less like her date and more like her well-dressed butler. Whispers followed us through the crowd. "That's him? The Durian God? He looks normal." Quiet, you fool. That's what's so brilliant about him. He's achieved a state of enlightened simplicity. You can't judge him by mortal standards. And that's Catherine Vance with him. They're the ultimate power couple. I fought the urge to roll my eyes. It didn't take long to spot my nemesis. Marcus Thorne, decked out in an obnoxious white tuxedo, was holding court in the center of a sycophantic circle, looking like a man who hadn't just had his company publicly gutted. The moment he saw me, his eyes lit up with vengeful fire. He smirked, grabbed a glass of champagne, and strode towards us. "Sterling, an honor. I didn't think you'd have the guts to show your face," he said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. Before I could respond, Catherine stepped slightly in front of me. "Is there a problem, Marcus?" she asked, her voice dangerously cold. "I'm talking to the organ grinder, not the monkey, Catherine." "Stay out of it," Thorne sneered. Okay, that did it. He could insult me all he wanted, but not her. I gently pulled Catherine behind me, put on my best impression of the cold, ruthless man from the photograph, and said, "Still barking, I see. I thought losers were supposed to be quiet." A hush fell over the people nearby. All eyes were on us. Thorne's face turned a shade of purple I'd never seen before. "You," he sputtered. "Talk is cheap. Let's see how you do when the bidding starts." "Anytime," I said, then turned my back on him and led Catherine to our table. Acting like a badass felt great. It also made my palms sweat. The auction began. The first few items were expensive jewelry and rare art. Every time I even glanced at an item, Thorne would immediately start bidding like a madman, driving the price into the stratosphere. I, on the other hand, stuck to my plan, sipping my sparkling water like a seasoned pro. After Thorne had spent tens of millions on things he clearly didn't want, he was practically steaming with rage. I was having the time of my life. Just as I was starting to get bored, the next item was brought on stage. It was a painting. It wasn't a grand landscape or a classical portrait. It was a simple photorealistic painting of a steaming bowl of instant ramen. The glistening noodles, the little green flecks of dehydrated vegetables, the perfectly round slice of processed meat. I stared. It was my soulmate in food form. A wave of nostalgia hit me so hard it almost knocked me over. I remembered my life before the accident, the long nights working overtime at a dead-end job, my stomach growling. The one thing that got me through was the cheap, instant ramen from the vending machine in the break room. It was the taste of my lost youth, the fuel for my pathetic dreams. This next piece, titled Midnight Oil, is from the celebrated young artist, Art Friedman. Bidding will start at $10,000, the auctioneer announced. 10,000? That was it. Almost involuntarily, my hand shot up, holding my bidding paddle. 11,000, I called out. The entire room went quiet. Every head turned to look at me. They were all wondering the same thing. What was the secret? What hidden meaning could this painting of cheap noodles possibly hold to make the legendary Mr. Sterling place his first bid of the night? Marcus Thorne's eyes widened. He stared intently at the painting, his mind racing. This had to be it. A man like Sterling wouldn't bid on something so mundane without a reason. It had to be a code, a secret message, a map to a hidden treasure. 20,000. Thorne shouted. I scowled. This moron again. 21,000. 50,000. Thorne shot back, giving me a smug look. I was starting to get angry. It's a painting of noodles, you idiot. It's my comfort food, my spirit animal. Why do you have to take it from me? 51,000. I ground out. 100,000. 101,000. 500,000. 501,000. $1 million. When Thorne, his face red and veins bulging in his neck, screamed out $1 million, my rational brain finally kicked back in. I slowly lowered my paddle. $1 million? For a painting of something that costs $1? I could buy a lifetime supply of actual ramen for that. I gave up. I looked at the painting one last time, my face a mask of longing and regret. I gave a small shake of my head, as if to say it wasn't meant to be. Then I gave a final, dismissive shrug. This little performance, however, was interpreted very differently by the audience. To them, it looked like this. Mr. Sterling had identified an item of immense hidden value, my bid. He had then masterfully baited his foolish opponent into a bidding war, Thorne's insane escalation. He then expressed his disappointment in his rival's lack of subtlety, the shake of the head. And finally, with the regal condescension of a king, He had gifted the prize to the lesser man, as if to say, "You can have this little toy. I'm bored now," the shrug. Bang! The auctioneer's gavel fell. Sold for $1 million to Mr. Thorne. Thorne leaped to his feet. He strutted onto the stage, soaking in the confused applause, and accepted the painting he had just spent a fortune on. He thought he had finally beaten me. He had no idea that all he'd won was a picture of my favorite flavor of Moroccan, and a new nickname, the Ramen King. After the auction, my reputation as a master strategist was more secure than ever. Everyone was convinced I'd played Thorne like a fiddle, tricking him into a public display of foolishness. My legend grew. On the drive home, Catherine was quiet, but I could tell she was in a good mood. I, on the other hand, was sulking. I really wanted that painting. Back at the mansion, I threw myself onto the sofa. Upset, Catherine asked, sitting next to me and handing me a glass of water. "No, just tired," I sighed. Pretending to be a genius was exhausting. "Let's not go to events like that anymore." She looked at me for a moment, then asked, "Did you really want some ramen?" I perked up immediately, nodding my head furiously. "Yes, desperately." She stood up and, without another word, walked into the kitchen. A few minutes later, a familiar, glorious scent drifted into the living room. The smell of my people. I shot off the sofa and followed my nose into the kitchen like a bloodhound. And there I saw something I would never forget. Catherine Vance, the Ice Queen, the corporate titan, was wearing a pink apron with a cartoon bear on it over her designer evening gown. Her back was to me as she stood at the stove, carefully using chopsticks to lift steaming noodles from a pot into a bowl. On the counter next to her were the seasoning packet and the little bag of dehydrated vegetables. She was making me instant ramen. My heart did a funny little flip in my chest. She drained the noodles, cracked an egg into the hot water, and cooked it perfectly before placing it gently on top of the ramen. Then she turned around with the bowl. She jumped slightly when she saw me standing there. A faint blush crept up her neck. I don't really cook," she said, avoiding my eyes as she handed me the bowl. "This was all I could find. I hope it's okay." I took the steaming bowl. I looked at her, in her glamorous dress and her ridiculous apron, a tiny smudge of flour on her cheek, her cool composure replaced by a shy awkwardness. In that moment, she wasn't Ms. Vance. She was just Catherine. I took a huge bite of the noodles. It was perfect, better than any ramen I'd ever had. I slurped down the noodles while she stood there, watching me. "Slow down," she said softly. "You'll choke." I looked up, my cheeks stuffed with noodles, and gave her the biggest, dumbest smile I could manage. And she smiled back. It was the first time I had ever seen her really smile. It was like watching a glacier melt in the spring. In that moment, I thought maybe amnesia wasn't so bad after all. That bowl of ramen changed everything. She was still Ms. Vance at the office, but at home, things were different. She started making sure I ate actual food instead of ordering takeout every night. She let me use her office as my personal gaming lounge, as long as I used headphones. And when the stress of being a fake genius got to me, a mug of hot chocolate would silently appear at my elbow. It was a strange, warm feeling. I was starting to get used to it, but my peaceful life was about to be interrupted again. Marcus Ramen King Thorne was no longer the problem. A much bigger threat had emerged. His father, Donovan Thorne, the true head of the Thorne Empire. "Mr. Sterling, this is bad," Bob said, looking paler than I'd ever seen him. "Donovan Thorne, the old fox himself, has made a move." My stomach tightened. The father of a guy like Marcus had to be a real piece of work. "What did he do?" He sent you an invitation," Bob said, his voice trembling, "to his private mountain estate. For tea and conversation." "I'm not going," I said, deploying my go-to strategy. "Sir, you have to." Bob looked like he was about to cry. In the invitation, he mentioned someone else would be there. A man they call the Butcher. The Butcher. The name alone gave me the creeps. He's the leader of the Blood Wolves, the most notorious mercenary group in Europe. "A monster," Bob explained, his face ashen. "And sir, according to our old intelligence files, the Butcher was a friend of yours, of the old you." My blood ran cold. I understood immediately. Donovan Thorne was smarter than his son. He wasn't challenging me in business. He was setting a trap. He suspected I was a fake, so he was bringing in an old associate to test me. If I failed, this Butcher, what's he like? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. He's Russian, brutal, only respects money and power. And he only speaks Russian when he talks to you. Russian? I barely passed high school Spanish. You wanted to speak Russian? The world started to spin. This was it. I was caught. What could I do? Confess? Tell them I was an imposter? They'd tear me limb from limb. I didn't sleep that night. I paced my study, trying desperately to dredge up a single memory of my past self. But there was nothing, just a blank white wall. The evening before the meeting, Catherine found me in the study. "You decided to go," she said. It wasn't a question. I nodded, a bitter laugh escaping my lips. What choice do I have? I'm damned if I do, damned if I don't. She was silent for a long time. What if? I started, looking her straight in the eye. What if I'm not the Mr. Sterling you knew? What would you do? She held my gaze, and something flickered in her eyes. You are, she said finally, her voice soft but certain. No matter what's happened to you, you are him. I didn't know why she was so sure. Maybe she was just trying to give me courage. But hearing her say it, it helped. To hell with it. Let's do this. It's just one Russian mercenary. Maybe I could just nod a lot. Donovan Thorne's estate was a fortress deep in the mountains outside the city. I was alone. Catherine and Bob weren't allowed inside. A butler led me to a traditional tea room. Inside, an old man in a silk robe, Donovan Thorne, was elegantly preparing tea. Across from him sat a mountain of a man. He was built like a bear, with a shaved head covered in a scorpion tattoo. Just sitting there, he radiated an aura of pure violence. This was the butcher. He saw me and grinned, revealing a row of gold teeth. He spoke in guttural, gravelly Russian. "Oh, my old friend, Chin, long time no see. Oh, my old friend, Chin, long time no see." I didn't understand a single word. I just gave him a stiff nod and sat down where Thorne indicated. The butcher's eyes never left me, dissecting me, searching for a weakness. "Chun, I heard you had an accident. Is your head okay?" "Chun, I heard you had an accident. Is your head okay?" He continued in Russian. Silence. Cold sweat trickled down my back. What do I do? What do I say? Thorne smiled, a placid, predatory smile. "Mr. Sterling, our guest is concerned about your health. Why don't you answer him?" He was backing me into a corner. My mind was a blank slate of pure terror. My throat closed up, and then, like a lightning strike, a memory. A stupid, useless memory from my old life. It was from a late-night session playing some first-person shooter. One of the Russian characters had a catchphrase he'd say before every mission. I thought it sounded cool, so I'd repeated it to myself a few times. It was the only Russian I knew. It was my only hope. I took a deep breath, looked the butcher dead in the eye, and in a horrible, clumsy accent, I spoke the only Russian words I knew. "The sun has not yet risen. The sun has not yet risen." I braced myself for the end, but it didn't come. The room was deathly quiet. I looked at the butcher. The grin was gone from his face. His eyes were wide, his pupils tiny pinpricks. The color drained from his face, leaving it a pasty white. He looked at me not with suspicion, but with a profound, soul-deep terror. Donovan Thorne looked confused. "What is it, my friend?" The butcher didn't answer. He shot to his feet, knocking over his teacup. He didn't even seem to notice the hot tea scalding his leg. He stared at me, trembling. Then, he did something that made Donovan Thorne's jaw drop. He bowed. A deep, respectful bow. Without another word, he turned and practically ran out of the room. Thorne and I were left staring at each other. The old man's smile was frozen on his face. He didn't know that "the sun has not yet risen" was the top secret abort code my former self had established with the butcher. It meant, the mission is compromised. We have a mole. Eliminate the contact immediately. I didn't know that either. I just thought it sounded cool. Somehow, I made it out of there alive. Donovan Thorne personally escorted me to my car, bowing and scraping and apologizing for wasting my time. I maintained a stony silence the whole way. Once the car was safely away from the estate, I collapsed into the back seat, shaking. I was alive. When I got back to the office, Catherine and Bob were waiting anxiously. "It's handled," I said, too exhausted to elaborate. Bob, of course, filled in the blanks himself. I knew it. A masterclass in psychological warfare. You turned his own weapon against him. Genius. I didn't have the energy to argue. That night, back at the mansion, I finally broke. The fear, the confusion, the exhaustion. It all came pouring out. I found Catherine in the living room. I can't do this anymore. I yelled, my voice cracking. I'm not him. I'm not Mr. Sterling. I don't speak Russian. I got lucky. I'm just a normal guy. I just want a normal life. Please, just tell me the truth. Who am I? I buried my face in my hands, sobbing like a child. I expected her to be disgusted, to call me a fraud and throw me out. Instead, I felt a gentle hand on my head. I know, she said softly. I looked up stunned. I know you're not him, she continued, her eyes full of a sad, complicated emotion. I've known since the day you woke up. You're nothing like him. Then, why? Because this was his plan. A tear traced a path down her cheek. I was never your girlfriend, Alex. I'm his most trusted subordinate. The real Mr. Sterling, the man you used to be. His family was destroyed by a powerful, secret organization. He dedicated his life to getting revenge. He created the persona of Mr. Sterling to fight them. He knew they would come for him. He anticipated he might be killed, or worse, lose his memory. So he set everything up. He left me one order. If the day comes when I am no longer myself, don't try to bring me back. Protect the person I become. Let him live a normal life. Let Alex Hayes live in peace. My brain felt like it was splitting in two. So, Mr. Sterling was me, a version of me forged in tragedy. And everything he did, all the power he amassed, it was all to protect the clueless, ramen-loving idiot I was now. I reached out and wiped the tear from her cheek. So, the plan. The thorns were just pawns for the organization, she explained. By getting the butcher to turn on them, you just dealt the organization a major blow, even if you didn't know it. So, I did something right today, I said with a weak smile. Alex, she said, using my real name for the first time. I'm sorry I lied to you. I shook my head. No, thank you, Catherine. And thank you to the other me, wherever he is. The truth didn't fix everything, but it lifted a mountain from my shoulders. I wasn't an imposter. I was the sequel. Catherine and I became partners. I was the public face, the mysterious genius. She was the real brains of the operation, turning my random ramblings into brilliant strategies. One day, during a heated debate about a new tech investment, I got frustrated. It's too hot to argue, I snapped. I'd rather be home with the AC on, eating ice cream. The next day, Catherine directed the team to scrap the controversial solar panel project and instead invest heavily in two smaller companies. One developing revolutionary cooling chip technology and another in sustainable, climate-controlled agriculture. Both became wildly successful. My reputation as the ice cream oracle was born. And once a week, without fail, she would put on that pink apron and make me instant ramen with an egg. In those moments, watching her in the kitchen, I felt happier than I'd ever been. I didn't want revenge. I just wanted this. I thought we could go on like that forever. Then she got a call. The color drained from her face. They're coming, she whispered, her voice trembling with fear. The organization. They've sent their top enforcer. His code name is the Ghost. He's here to clean house. That meant us. We have to go, she said, pressing a passport and a credit card into my hand. It was his final contingency plan. For you. Get out of the country, Alex. Disappear. What about you? I asked, grabbing her arm. I'll stay. I'll buy you time, she said, her eyes filled with a terrible resolve. I looked at her, and for the first time, I didn't feel fear. I felt anger. I was done running. I was done hiding behind her and behind the ghost of my former self. I'm not leaving you, I said. Whatever happens, we face it together. Just then, the doorbell rang. Ding dong. It was him, the Ghost. I walked to the door and looked through the peephole. A man in a delivery uniform stood on the porch, a baseball cap pulled low over his face. He was holding a pizza box. A killer who delivers? I opened the door. He looked up. His face was young, handsome, and completely devoid of emotion. Your delivery, he said in a monotone. One supreme pizza. I didn't order a pizza, I said. The lady of the house did, he said, nodding towards Catherine, who looked as confused as I was. Then he leaned in closer. Mr. Sterling, he said, his voice a low whisper. The boss sent a message. My heart hammered against my ribs. Here it comes, he said. The Ghost paused, his dead eyes boring into mine. Operation Supreme is complete. The organization's leadership has been retired. As of now, you're the new boss. Call anytime you want a pizza. I'll deliver it myself. He bowed, turned, and vanished into the night. I stood in the doorway, holding a warm pizza box, staring at Catherine, whose mind was clearly just as blown as mine. Operation Supreme? New boss. So, the ultimate revenge plan of my ruthless former self was to order pizza and have his own secret assassin take out the entire leadership of the organization he worked for? Catherine was staring at me, her eyes wider than I'd ever seen them, shining with a new, terrifying level of awe. I see it now. She breathed. It was never about revenge. It was a hostile takeover. You let yourself lose your memory to appear harmless. You used me to create a smokescreen. You knew they would send a ghost, because the ghost was always your man. You weren't playing chess. You were playing a whole different game. She looked at me as if I were a god. Alex, Mr. Sterling, you magnificent, terrifying bastard. I looked down at the pizza in my hands, the smell of pepperoni and cheese filling the air. What could I possibly say to that? I opened the box, pulled out a slice, and took a big bite. Well, I said, my mouth full. We'd better eat this before it gets cold. Epilogue. In a private, high-end psychiatric hospital on the outskirts of the city, a nurse pushed a man in a wheelchair out onto a sunny lawn. The man, Donovan Thorne, stared blankly at the sky, drool trickling from the corner of his mouth. He spent his days muttering the same thing, over and over again. The sun. Why won't the sun rise? Across town, Marcus Ramen King Thorne had hung the $1 million painting of instant noodles in the center of his new, smaller office. He spent hours every day staring at it, convinced that if he could just unlock its secrets, he could finally understand the mind of his greatest rival. And